Welcome to r/ProRevenge. Today we have 3 stories of people getting theirs after being gotten. Story number 1. Steal my iPod. Screw your laptop. A story from 2007. Imagine being in high school, back in the latter days of George Bush, and finally buying that iPod of your dreams. After saving up your allowance, and the money you made around the neighborhood doing random, blank, work, and lifeguarding at the local pool. Yup. That was me. And I was that douchebag 14-year-old who would make sure you knew I had one of the better iPods, one that could play video. It was the latest Nano, if I remember right. Simpler times. But every story needs an antagonist. My sister happened to find that role many times. We are very close now, but back then, it wasn't so rosy. She was a teenager as well, and spent most of those years resenting me. If I had something nice, screw you for having that. I was quite protective of my precious iPod. She raised quite the shitstorm when my parents refused to buy her one. Your brother saved his money. We didn't pay for it. We are not stopping you from buying one too. If you save your money. That was their attitude toward any luxury that us kids wanted. Even up to that time when buying a first car was on the table. We each had to buy our own. It built character and taught responsibility. Well, that iPod goes missing one day at home when I knew darn well I had left it charging at the family computer. I left it unattended. My parents confirmed they did not touch it, and all eyes were on my sister. I'll jump ahead here. As it turned out, she had indeed taken it and had one of her friends to temporarily store it until the heat was off of her. She knew my parents would essentially strip search her. After this unraveled, one of my buddies saw her with the iPod at school several days later. It was time for payback. Back then, I like to think of myself as a bona fide hacker. That's right, I knew all about batch files and how to open command prompt. Don't freaking cross me. You have no idea what I'm capable of. Yeah, anyway, we don't talk about those dark days. But I actually did know enough to copy/paste some destructive commands into scripts using del and reg delete commands and the like. In the days of Windows XP, this would essentially require reinstalling the OS. I also was aware of a program called bat2exe which could package your batch files and associated files it would call from the same directory into a normal exe file. And you could pick an icon to slap on that exe if you had the ICO file on hand. It doesn't take a genius, because as much as I thought I was one, I wasn't, to devise a plan here. I put a script together with the worst shite I could muster, and gave it the Internet Explorer icon. This went onto my sister's computer, which was an old Pentium M laptop which barely had enough, bleep, to load MySpace at the time. My hacker abilities allowed me to log into the administrator account by booting into safe mode or something and simply replacing the iExplorer.exe main file with my science experiment. I believe I had it to where it actually opened the real Internet Explorer in parallel, so I could deny this more easily. Fast forward to that magical moment. She's home from color guard practice and is ready for an evening full of crappy webcam photos that use every mid-2000s effect ever created. But before she can upload them, disaster. The screen resolution goes tits up, and the color profile is 16 colors for some reason. Random pop-up messages every few seconds. Microsoft Windows has detected a giant, see you next Tuesday, please consider a system upgrade, and stuff like that. Your hard drive is jammed with peanut butter, restart required. The whole script plays out, and she's left with a paperweight until someone can get around to sorting it. Unfortunately, the computer guy in the family took quite a while to get around to it. My dad knew darn well that I had something to do with this, even if he didn't understand it fully. He made my sister apologize to me before I helped her with her laptop and made her buy me a new case for it after she threw away the one I had to try and make it less identifiable. Well, that's the story, folks. Hope 2021 is off to a decent start for you. Edit. To people asking what happened to the iPod. I got it back after learning from my buddy that she was going to have it on her. She was in a world of shite from my very traditional discipline that child parents, in addition to her laptop being a boat anchor for a few weeks. Story number 2. Mess with my Christmas? Pardon me, as I ruin yours. This slow burn starts a full year and a half before my plan came into effect. Earlier in the year, my dad quite sensibly suggested that with the size of our family Christmas party, we skip a generation with gifts to ease the financial strain as the extended family grew. At the time, I was struggling with my business and athletic career, and my wife, then girlfriend, was working on her second master's degree, so I suggested names from a hat, but he wanted to spoil all his grandchildren. I said fair enough, I'll chip in for Roma's cruise and buy gifts for my step siblings, but don't expect anything grand. Dramatis personae for that Christmas party, me, 28-year-old, at the time, heavyweight mixed martial artist, and strength coach aka small-time athlete working a day job, to barely make rent in addition to training full-time. Martha, stepsister, 40ish, an aging mombi whose only assets are starting to sag too much for them to be assets anymore, leaving her with no other definable personality traits. Jane, my oldest niece 12, stepsister's daughter, imagine the most vapid teenage stereotype you can, and multiply it by 1000. Tim, my oldest nephew 9, stepsister's son, living proof that you're never too young to be an a-hole. Robert, stepbrother, 36, formerly cool dude who gave up on life when his kids were born, years later would gain back enough willpower and gumption to physically assault his wife. Tammy, 6, bro's daughter, sweet and shy girl, terrified by my mere presence, the wisest of the bunch in my humble opinion. Bobber, 7, bro's son, a generally nice kid who at this time was part way into evolving into an a-hole after being constantly told to look up to and emulate thing 2. Tammy has brought a Nintendo DS, and all the kids are struggling to see/play it together, so I foolishly offer to loan them mine to lighten the load. Tammy agrees to share with Jane, and Bubba agrees to share with Tim. Having stupidly deprived myself of my means to escape social obligations, I go to the living room to acquire that much older cure for not wanting to deal with other people, alcohol. Not even having had time to pour a dram, my trained ear picks up from the kids' room the unmistakable sound of one human being pummeling another. I politely suggest to Robert that he might want to go have a look, but bro hasn't given two shites about anything in about 7 years, so he waves it off, and I go to investigate. I walk in to see that Tim may be a jackhole, but is not untalented, and is managing to strike, shove into a wall, and kick Bubba all at the same time, while attempting to play my DS with his other hand, having decided his turn began the moment I left the room. Jane has simply wrestled the DS from Tammy, who is now sitting in the corner crying. I shout for Martha, informing her that, if she doesn't get in here, to break things up, before I count to 10, I would have a stern conversation with them. She turns up, and separates the kids, and I retrieve my DS. Instead of giving Tim a lesson on sharing, and not hitting people, she proceeds to berate Bubba, the kid who was beaten, for not simply giving up the DS to her little piece of shite, and making her son look bad. Jane simply lets out a tweenaged sigh for the ages, and tosses the other DS into the crying Tammy. I then excuse myself from the party, thanking whatever gods may be, that I don't have to provide gifts for any of those little shites. 6 months later, my firm belief in atheism is confirmed as bro calls me, and this conversation ensues. Robert, hey elbow smash, while I really appreciated the gifts last year, you should really get something for the kids this year instead. Christmas is all about the children after all. Me, no, I turn up to chat with you, and Oma, I really don't give two shites about the kids. Robert, that's a mean thing to say about my kids. Don't you care about them? Me, you cared about them so much that at the last party, you couldn't be bothered to break up a fight where your son was being beaten bloody. Robert, Tim is a good kid. Martha said he just had a bad day. Me, he was literally beating your child. You didn't put pics on social media for a week because of the bruises. If Tim were an adult and had that kind of bad day, I'd have had a stern conversation with him and convinced him peacefully to lay on the floor until the police arrived. Robert, well stepsis and I were talking, and we think you should buy stuff for the kids next year instead of us. Me, well I'm happy not to buy you anything, but I'm not getting crap for Martha's little shites, especially when she encourages that behavior. Robert, well if you aren't going to get something for all the kids, you shouldn't get anything at all. It's not right if you don't treat them equally. Me, done. Now I'm sure they wish it has been this simple, but unfortunately it wasn't, and I certainly wouldn't have written such a long-winded story if that were the payoff. Thanks for bearing with me so far, we are almost at the end. A few months later, about 2 weeks before Christmas, I get an email from my dad with links to various toys, mostly from Toys R Us, which still existed at the time. When I call him back to ask what that's all about, this conversation ensues. Me, hey, what's up? I got your email. What's that all about? Dad, those are gifts for the kids for Christmas. Me, that's cool if you're getting them that. I'll see them when the kids open them. Dad, no, that's for you to get them. Me, I don't buy for that generation, remember, and I already sent you my contribution to Oma's cruise. Dad, you need to get stuff for the kids. Don't you want them to look up to you as an uncle? Me, not really. Also, what part of my life suggests to you that they ought to look up to me as any sort of role model? You'd be better of telling them to grow up to be rock stars. Dad, not the point. Christmas is about the children. If you don't get them this stuff, I won't put your name on the card for Roma. Me, that's a crappy thing to do, considering I already paid into that. Dad, will you get the stuff, or not? Me, well, guess my name isn't going on the card then. This will cost me more than a month's rent, so you can take this list and grease it up real nice. Dad, interrupting. Calm your jets. This is what they want. Me, I'll get them a token something, but I'm not taking out a loan. Dad, fine. Just make it something they enjoy. Me, if what I get doesn't put a giant smile on each and every one of their faces, I'll buy you dinner at a steakhouse of your choosing. Dad, that's the spirit. Talk to you later. So, Christmas rolls around, and my wife and I have bought not just one, but 4 gifts for each of the little ones, and wrapped them all beautifully. My dad, correctly, assumes it's all probably from the dollar store, but it's nicely wrapped, and he gives me a look of approval as I place it under the tree. My wife and I schmoz for a bit, and then suggest that, since we brought us several gifts for each of the kids, why don't they open one each before dinner, so they have something to do while they wait. Their parents of course agree, as it gives them more of a reason to ignore their kids and talk about them instead, so they send us off to hand out gifts to their kids. Martha is looking especially smug. As they begin to unwrap them, I prepare the camera as my wife goes for our coats, and I stick around just long enough to immortalize on film the big shite-eating grin on each of the kids' faces as they see what their gift is. Less than 1 minute later, the first blast from the air horn, Tim's gift, can be heard in the hallway clearly by my wife and I as we make our way to the elevator. I have no idea how much of the bulk pack of silly string, Tammy's gift, or the 36 rainbow pack of off-brand sharpers, Bobber's gift, ended up on the walls, but I do know they repainted the place the next month. Whether or not the pile of slap-on bracelets we got for Jane ended up on the wrists and legs of the parents as they tried to contain the other 3 will be left to the imagination, but I like to think they all ended up in the height of 80s fashion before Boxing Day. I may never know if they opened the rest of their presents. Everyone got a copy of each of the other's gifts, you know, for fairness, plus a bunch of gross and mildly inappropriate temporary tattoos. In the confusion, none of them noticed either me or my wife leaving. I'm certain at some point they did notice the pretty gold envelope addressed to the parents on the tree. Inside was a very pretty card, blank, but for the following note. This was a warning shot from off the top of my head. I've got a whole year to get creative for next time. Merry Christmas, E. I never bought anyone steak dinner. However, I enjoyed several more Christmases with my Oma and Dad until they passed, and I stopped seeing that side of the family at all. No mention of this incident or gifts for the kids was ever made again. Story number 3. I recruited an unwitting army to annoy an a-hole. Back in the early 90s, my friend, I'll call him Lou because that's his name, was selling his RX-7 via an ad in the old print auto trader. It came out every Thursday, so that first weekend was critical for sales. The very first guy that came to see it on Saturday said he wanted to buy after driving it. Of course, he had to finance, so they couldn't finish the sale during the weekend. Lou was worried about losing all the bites from the new ad, so he asked for a deposit of $500. The guy wrote a check Lou told the rest of the callers that weekend that it was sold and, unfortunately, didn't ask for their numbers in case it fell through. This story predates caller ID availability in my area by a couple years, so those leads were gone. As you surely expect by now, the guy flakes on Monday and Lou deposits the check. Payment stopped. Big surprise. Sitting around my apartment, we schemed revenge, but all we had to go on was the check. Lucky for karma, there was a phone number printed on it. Our first idea was to write a little program to dial his number repeatedly from my modem, but that would be easily stopped and probably get us in direct trouble. Then Luke got a page from his work. This was back in the one-way pager days. You call the pager's dedicated phone number, it sounds a tone, then you punch digits for the number you want to be sent to the pager. The person with pager receives the number you entered and, presumably, calls it. Everyone with a pager made sure that people who needed to get a hold of them had the number for their pager. You'd see pager numbers in print and TV ads all the time for various services. Boom. Angelic choir sings. Heavenly light goes off. Lou's pager number and my pager number had the same prefix, middle 3 digits. What if we randomly dial numbers with that prefix and page them all to this guy's number? So, we order a pizza, open some beers, and start looking through the yellow pages at locksmiths and tow truck services to find more pager prefixes. We wind up with a dozen or so. After that, it's half an hour of coding in ye old ball and C++. I put together a program that would cycle through our list of known prefixes and add a random final 4 digits to get a random pager. It calls the pager's number, pauses, then dials this a-hole's number, and throws a 911 suffix on there for good measure, which is something people with pagers understood to indicate an emergency of some kind. The whole thing was just generating a string like ATDT602 with a pager prefix number and random last 4, plus a common with the jackhole's number plus 911. Commas make pauses, since you need to connect to the paging service before you can enter the message. Make string, center modem, wait for no carrier, hang up, repeat. We start eating the pizza and let it fly. I was very picky about my devices, so my modem was a US robotics carrier. You could set an S register to control how long it would sound each tone when dialing. Uber nerds like myself would keep tinkering with that to get it as fast as possible while still being recognized by the phone service. It was very fast. I swear it could run through 4 pages per minute, so this guy would get 240 calls/hour. We just watched it run and laughed our ears off. We realized pretty early on that we didn't really know if it was working, so we wandered down to the 7-Eleven and called him from a payphone, just in case he could somehow trace it, or the popo were on the case and watching. A man answered, and I said, "Hello, I got a page at this number." I heard an audible sigh, and then he just hung up. Gold. We ended up running it for a few hours, then let it go quiet for a few days. Then we scheduled it to start dialing in the middle of the night every few days, plus we'd fire it up by hand randomly whenever we had a party. We checked again from the 7-Eleven after a week, and it went to an answering machine, which did the rapid tone at the end of the greeting to indicate the tape was full. We reasoned that the line was still ringing anyway, so we kept at it for another month or so. Eventually, we got the disconnected warning when we made one of our regular checkups. I'm sure he just changed the number. I like to think about that guy answering the phone after a few days of silence when we started it up. I can vividly imagine his response at the "Did someone page me to this number?" as he slams the phone down and then it rings again a few seconds later. Or, of course, coming home from work and having an answering machine full of random people asking about being paged. And, yeah, we annoyed several thousand people into calling this guy by the end. But each of those people was only put out for a single call. A cost, yes, but a necessary one for justice. Thanks for listening.